Wait, is this thing on? Can y'all hear me? Okay, here we go.
Woo! Just a dash. Just a dash. Just a dash. Just a dash.
Right. What's up, y'all? I sound so enthusiastic, but welcome back to Just a Dash. I feel like a few weeks ago I probably said that I was having a shitty couple weeks and I hoped that the weeks afterwards were better. And it's kind of been a mix. You know, I think there's been so many retrogrades happening. I do think it's an energy thing, but I also just think like, I don't know, y'all. I feel like a lot of the BS we've all been dealing with, whether it's in our personal lives or our work lives, it's kind of coming to a head. And I think a lot of us are making tougher decisions in terms of what we want to be keeping in the present time, like what we want to be focusing our energy on and what is going to be shaping our future. And I think I've kind of been in that crux in a lot of different spaces in my life, and it's a balancing act, you know? So I think that's what this last week has kind of been about for me. I kind of had a disruption to my routine, you know, different things in my life have come to an end, and I've kind of had to really remind myself about the importance of self-care, but not only when other people encourage me to do it, but like learning to encourage myself to do it. And that's something that I personally struggle with a lot. I think if a person is naturally a giver, sometimes for some reason, ironically, it's hard to turn around and give back to yourself. So that's something that I'm learning and I'm working on. But in other news, it is officially Cancerian season. So shout out to all the Cancer kings and queens and everything in between out there. I know people have a lot of shit to say about our emotionality, but the reality is there are a few people who have the emotional depth that we do in the zodiac, who have the compassion that we do, who have the forgiving nature that we do, who have that mama bear energy that we do. We are incredibly charismatic, incredibly loving, incredibly kind, okay, incredibly genuine, and we don't take no shit, okay? Cross the Cancer and see what happens. But, you know, it's my season, and I'm turning the big 3-0, y'all, in July, so it's really come with a lot of different realizations. I don't think I'm in a space where I'm like necessarily overwhelmed by turning 30. I think there was a point in my life where I definitely would beat myself up about the fact that I haven't accomplished certain things, or just different ways that I was measuring success and measuring it up against a period of time instead of my growth. And I think because I've changed my perspective on what success looks like for me or feels like for me, 30 doesn't feel daunting. It feels very exciting. I think I feel most secure than I have in my life. And that's not to say I am the most secure I will ever be, but in terms of just my growth and where I'm at and how I feel about myself and how I care about myself, or at least how I have the capacity to make that a priority. And the way that I've just learned to love myself, y'all, this podcast would not have happened if not for the growth and the evolvement that I experienced, you know, in the last few years. And so it's really exciting to turn 30. I feel like the best is just ahead for some reason. I just feel like I'm about to really tap into not my potential, but rather my purpose. And that is something that's really, really, really cool, because I think for a long time in my 20s, I was definitely operating in this space of the imposter syndrome, you know, like you know you have certain talents, but you don't believe it's at the same level, you know, as people who may have been in the industry longer than you. And I'm talking about anything related to kind of communications, marketing, public relations, events, because that's the scope of what I do when I'm not on the mic. But yeah, I'm starting to feel a lot more comfortable in my skin and comfortable with what I have to offer. And I think it's just starting to really challenge old constructs and old concepts of how I used to see myself as a person and how I used to see myself in certain circles and certain intersections in life. And so it's really cool to be in a space now where I can look at myself in the mirror, even on the tough days where I'm having really bad bouts of anxiety, which are just as present, y'all. Just because I'm saying all this shit, it doesn't mean that I don't also struggle on a daily basis, and I don't have moments where I, feel like I'm regressing, even though I'm not, even though that's part of the journey. But all that to say is I can still look in the mirror when I'm in the middle of those moments, be like, hey, we know what this feels like. We know why this is a defense mechanism. We know why your brain thinks this way. We know what trauma it experienced to react this way, and that you think this is a protective tool, but you don't need this anymore. You've grown, you got it, you're smarter, you're wiser, you're capable, you have better discernment, all these different sorts of things that, have taken, honestly, up till almost being 30 to have an understanding on how to navigate. So kudos to anyone else who's turning 30 this year, and kudos to anyone else who has a birthday, coming up, and you're just celebrating more life and the ways you've continued to grow another year around the sun. I'm really, as always, excited about the episode that's ahead for y'all. I got to speak with one of my dear friends who I used to work with when I worked at a museum, and it was just so wonderful to have Dawnette on. I've known her for quite some time now when I think about it, and our relationship has always been one that is so genuine. She's just a person who I know I can come to and pour into, and she will pour just as much back. She's just so knowledgeable, and just the way that, she delivers history to you, and the way that she delivers the truth of a situation or of a circumstance or a construct, it's really beautiful. You can tell that she's a person who truly values education, and not because it's some title to hold, but because of the power it has to shape a conversation and to shape a movement and to shape progress. So I'm going to be talking with Dawnette about colorism in this episode. I know it can be a very fraught or sort of tender topic for a lot of people, particularly within the Black community and in other communities as well. I mean, this is a huge issue as well within Latin America. It's a huge issue within South Asia. So colorism truly is something that is a global conversation, but today's conversation very much more so focused on the experience of Black people, because that's how we both identify, and particularly that of Black women, because colorism does have such an influential impact on that community, on that identity. So before we even continue and get to word to the wise, first things first, I want to say that there is not going to be an Are You For Real in this episode, only because my conversation with Dawnette was so incredibly insightful. And we actually ended up kind of going off on different tangents, which is no surprise because hello, it's me. But those tangents were also so incredibly powerful. So I really didn't want to cut down this conversation too much, y'all. And the reality is, it's longer than a typical conversation I would have, because this is such a broad and expansive topic that kind of sends you off on different tangents in terms of just the byproducts of not only racism, but colorism as well, just at different levels, at different facets, at different perspectives. So it really is such an intriguing conversation. And I really didn't want to make this episode overwhelmed with too much heavy content, because that's also something that I, am thinking about. I really genuinely love doing every segment of this show, but Are You For Real is definitely the most challenging, because I intentionally choose what I'm digesting when it comes to the media, particularly when we're talking about news, because I don't think news is disseminated the same way it used to be. I remember as a kid watching the news all the time with my dad before he would take me to school. It was like a routine, a ritual that we had. And what I was hearing was objective information, not the same storyline, not the same clickbait that's just perpetuated over and over again by different pundits on either side without actually giving updated information. And it's really, I think, desensitizing after a while to be seeing certain images or hearing certain words and not really understanding the depth or the impact of whatever trauma or violence is being said on the news. I think people have gone numb. So I really try to be very mindful and intentional about what I'm actually digesting. So when I'm doing Are You For Real, oftentimes it requires me to do a lot more research and to kind of dive headfirst into all those different news segments. And it can be a lot, it can be overwhelming, but in the same token, I really do appreciate being able to lend my voice, to an issue or speak up on something that matters to me. So it's about a balance. It's about a balance. And in this episode, I think it's balanced out really well in Say What. And so I don't think it really calls for an Are You For Real segment. So that's just a heads up for y'all. It's going to be a little bit of a longer say what, but probably a shorter episode overall. So before we even get into say what, you know what comes first is always word to the wise. So let's get into it. All right, y'all. So let's get into it. Let's get into word to the wise. I am so honored to share this word to the wise because it is from a person who I so admire, and I feel like we were all so lucky to share a lifetime with this person. And two, this person has so much life experience, and I find that their quotes kind of they have a different sort of magic to them because you can tell this is coming from someone's hard-earned wisdom. You know, they're not sprouting off something that's kumbaya. It's like, no, this is the thesis. These are kind of the step-by-steps that can help you change your perspective and maybe reconsider approaching your life, or at least a moment in your life, a circumstance in your life, in a different way that benefits you and those around you so that you can grow. So I really love this person, and the person who I'm talking about is Maya Angelou. I say Maya Angelou, I always have. Maybe it's the French that runs through my family's veins, I don't know. Maya Angelou is an American poet. She's a memoirist and a civil rights activist. She has so much work under her belt. I think she has 7 autobiographies. She's got so many books on essays, poetry, plays, movies, television. I mean, it spans so much time, and she was so generous with her gifts, y'all, and it was devastating. She passed away in 2014, but she's left such a legacy behind. I think what people probably know her most for is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which talks about her life up until the age of 17. And it brought her so much international recognition and acclaim. But even beyond that, I mean, her life, you know, talking about her life, bringing acclaim, like this woman was doing everything all over the place in her young adulthood. You know, she was a fry cook, she was a sex worker, she was part of the cast of Porgy and Bess, which I believe is like one of the first operas that featured Black people. I mean, she was active in the civil rights movement and worked with MLK and Malcolm X. So this is a person who just like, I don't know, like talk about being inspired by someone or just wanting to not necessarily emulate, because I think everybody has their own special sauce, you know, to add to the mix, but it's just someone like you look at their flavors and how they like seasoned their life and you're just like, yes, sis, you did good. So this is the quote from Maya Angelou. Courage. You develop courage by doing small things, like just as if you wouldn't want to pick up 100-pound weight without preparing yourself. So I love this quote so much because I think a lot of times in my life, when I've started to make a lot of wonderful changes, one day I can feel so great, and then the next day it feels like I'm crashing from a high. And I feel like I can be in a mindset where I see that as a setback, you know, and I see it as, oh, here I go again, having the same sort of anxious reaction. Here I go again, you know, letting this person upset me. Here I go again, letting my boundaries be crossed. You know, like I think I beat myself up a lot. I can be incredibly self-critical. And I think a lot of times part of that self-criticism, follow me here, y'all, because I know it doesn't seem connected, but it will connect. I think a lot of times that self-criticism comes from the fact that it feels so overwhelming and daunting to become a new person, to shed old mindsets, to shed old constructs, to shed old behaviors and reactions to things. Because the reality is there's some comfort in that. I'll tell you straight up, when I have really bad anxiety, and I've been dealing with this with the past couple of weeks, I have particular foods that I eat. I have particular ways that I pick at my body. And it has been really helpful to see a quote like this, because sometimes I think I need the reminder that it's not about tackling everything at one time. It's about literally tackling one thing at a time and trusting that as you maintain and as you have the courage to shed those old parts of yourself, to be more of yourself, to be more vulnerable, the more those changes will feel more solidified and feel like less effort and feel extraneous, you know? So I think just tying back to my anxiety example, I think for me, Sometimes like a step of victory is that, oh, I didn't go and eat like gorge on all that food just then. I decided to turn around, meditate, and take a walk. But even doing that, that takes courage to face yourself and to call yourself out. Or, I might find myself in a position where I'm actually really frustrated with how a person crossed a boundary. But I have this trouble of not wanting to make someone feel bad and instead then just wallowing in my own guilt and uncomfortability. But the step of courage is calling that person up and saying, listen, I'm not saying this because I want to be hurtful to you, but I need you to understand my boundary and why this made me uncomfortable. I have found that when I have the courage to do those little small things that terrify me, that's when I start seeing the results I want for myself and in my relationships with other people. It's wild. Everything really does exist on the other side of fear that you're looking for, including the truth. And that's the wild part, because I think sometimes we hold on to shit because we're scared to lose it. But the reality is the shit that you're holding on to that you're afraid to lose may be what's holding you back. So it's wild. And this quote just really kind of solidified that feeling for me that even on the days where I'm fucking up or I feel like I'm just taking 5 steps back, it's really important to remind myself that I even had the courage to take 10 steps forward, that I have been putting in the work, that I have been really trying to understand myself more and my traumas more and my triggers more. And the reality is that I didn't have the support that I needed up until this point to know how. So you have to extend yourself some grace. And that's really tricky. So again, I'm going to read that quote one more time because it really resonated with me. And I think it's really important to focus on the connection between courage working its way through you in small ways, in small strategies, in smaller structures, in smaller decisions, smaller mindsets. It's you choosing to say yes or no to something when you would have said the opposite. It's choosing to honor yourself if you need space and not feeling bad about it. It's, having the courage to own up to the places where you may need to do better as a friend, as a partner, as an employee. Like it's really like breaking down things and focusing on things at a lower level and then watching how they build up upon each other. And that really just, again, the quote was courage. You develop. And I'm going to interrupt myself again because develop, that's so important. That's something that happens over time. It's not immediate. You're not going to feel courageous all the time. You're not going to feel brave all the time. You may not call up that person and course correct them on the boundary that time, And you got to forgive yourself for that too, because reprogramming takes time. But the next time you will, that's what you have to say to yourself. Next time I will. Next time I will have the courage. All right, so one last time, y'all, just because this quote really resonated with me and I hope it resonates with you. And it's just a reminder that you're probably doing a lot better than you think you are. And if you've done one thing differently than the day you did it before and it benefited you, then you're doing a pretty great fucking job. So that quote is courage. You develop courage by doing small things, like just as if you wouldn't want to pick up 100-pound weight without preparing yourself. And that is by the one and only Maya Angelou. So that's your word to the wise this week, y'all. Like I said before, we don't have an Are You For Real, so we're going to jump right into Say What. I'm super excited for this conversation, but I'm just giving you a heads up. This is definitely a longer conversation. There's definitely a lot of heavier topics. I think we both share a lot of our experiences that I think are worth digesting and listening to. It might even spark conversations with you and your own friends. So definitely buckle up because it's going to be a bumpy ride. So, now it's time for, can I get a drum roll, please? Say what?
Just a dash.
Let's get started. I'm going to take my sip of tea. I'm going to turn into Podcast Dash.
I love it. Is that a glass straw?
This is a 9 3/4 mug. It's for Harry Potter.
Oh, okay. There it is. Okay.
Okay,
no shade.
No. That's the perfect way to get started. I'm keeping that. So hello, everyone. Welcome back to Are You For Real? No, that's not even the right segment. Welcome back to Say What? So I'm really excited about this conversation, y'all. I will have already spoken about it in the intro, and I spoke about it a little bit on social media, but today we're talking about colorism, which I'm going to be completely honest with people. To me, being black is like stumbling into like a very appealing storefront. Like, just like there's all these gems and trinkets. But then when you like open the like storage door, there's like a million more doors. And each of them is like a kaleidoscope of their own trinkets and stories and experiences and prejudices and biases. Like it's just like such a hodgepodge. And like I don't think I've ever encountered a black person whose experience with race is identical. I don't think so. Like I think everyone just has very subjective and particular experiences, because race in and of itself is a very, it seems basic, but it's a very nuanced subject. And that subject, gives way to other nuanced things. So to me, colorism is really like the grandchild of racism in a lot of ways. And I find it to be even more nuanced because oftentimes colorism is not necessarily being, I guess the word perpetuated. It is being perpetuated by the oppressor, but it also gets perpetuated by the oppressed. Like it exists within our communities. And so I think that makes it even more almost like difficult to dissect. But anyway, before we get any further, I obviously have a special guest. The reason why I brought this special guest on is literally because we have these sorts of conversations in real life, like all the time. Like, just very easily, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I think it's our Virgo energy. I'm a Virgo moon, and you're just a Virgo queen, and you're just very incisive and succinct and no nonsense. And I think also, though, you're very compassionate and very open-minded in the same token, and I think you're able to look at very different perspectives. And yeah, so I'll let you introduce yourself. Please share with the people who you are, what you do, and why you love what you do. Take it away.
Oh my God, yes, thank you. That was such a beautiful introduction. so yeah, so I'm gonna try my best to intro myself here, especially because like I'm so used to like work mode that a
Yeah.
part of me was very adamant. I'm just like, I'm also coming here as like your friend. So I'm just like, how does
Yes.
one intro when I'm just like, I just know her. So but yeah, so my name is Dawnette. My 9 to 5 is I work at a museum, manage like visitor experience and all that fun stuff.
Slay.
Um, and I have a whole bunch of other hobbies. Because my background is actually more within the arts, studied animation, did a little bit of freelance work, and then had, the typical story realizing that it's just not for me. And as I come more and more, or returning back to that, because I definitely kind of had a moment in my life where I just was not doing any art, coming back to it, because my biggest thing was just that I learned that I lost the love of it when I try to make it a job. So it's definitely something you can actually see, like a little sketch
I
in
was gonna
my.
ask if that's yours in the
It
background.
is.
Come
It
on, product
is.
placement.
Oh my God, thank you.
Cute.
But yeah, so I feel like I don't like to be defined by one thing. I also realize as I'm just growing and learning that I don't define myself as anti-capitalist, but I definitely realize I have a lot of baseline anti-capitalist views of just like having, just because you love doing something doesn't mean you have to monetize it. And just kind of like, because I love making my own like body butters and lotions, I love like drawing, I love doing so many crafting things, I love plants, and it turns out that I'm pretty decent at it if
Come on, 20
it goes
plants.
through. So I just do what makes me happy and what fulfills me. And in my job, what I love so much about it, and it's funny because I grew up as someone who I was like that classic, like, oh, I want to order pizza, mom, but can you talk to them on the phone, because I'm just so shy.
Oh my
But
gosh. I like believe it, but I don't believe it.
exactly, like the growth. Let's talk about the growth here. um, but yeah, so in my job I interact a lot with people, and not just like from a customer service base, but as a museum educator, it's also like educating.
Mm-hmm.
And the museum I work at features non-Western art. It's actually Himalayan art. So I really do like, as somebody who grew up a child of immigrants, where I get an opportunity to learn about a culture different than mine, something that's like
Sure.
not rooted, that's not American. Um, and I get to teach other people, especially because they come in with so many different misconceptions about the religion, about the culture. Especially it's, as being an Asian culture, there's that kind of exotifying that ends up happening. So I really do enjoy just educating and talking to people, and just teaching people about a living culture. Like, people like to think of it as like a land far, far away, like thousands
Sure.
of years ago, when there's like a thriving Himalayan community in Queens and like in
Yes.
Brooklyn. Like,
Come
it's,
on now.
they're here. So, but yeah, I think I guess that's me. Just me.
Yes. Not I guess that's me. I guess that's me as a kaleidoscope. Literally, like I was saying earlier, I'm telling you, like no black person I know is identical. And
Yeah,
I
totally.
know Dawnette because we worked at the same place together, and I love when I can form a relationship with someone outside of a place I work, because I feel like that speaks to that person's energy. And I've always, Donna and I just always have wonderful conversations. I think that we're both very honest,
Mhm.
direct people. I will just say a little quick funny story. Donnette walked in on me one time reading A Man for Filth, and sis just
Yo,
let me do it. She just like glanced my way, was like, I don't need to be here, and then like dipped. And
I'm telling
I
you,
was really wonderful.
I was literally the human manifestation of that Homer gif where he just slowly backs into like the bushes, because
Yeah,
I really I really
but then,
walked in like,
yeah,
oh snap, like
yeah.
people I like in one room, let me go in and say hi. And then once I like walked in and slowly realized what was happening, I was just like, oh
But I love that, like, later on, you were like, you were going in and I loved it. Like, it was
right,
like,
because even when I walked in, I was just like, she said no lie, like everything she
mm,
said was accurate and needed to be said, so I'm just
correct.
going to excuse myself because I don't want to disrupt the flow.
Right.
And we'll just converse another time. I was just like, you
I
know what,
love that.
I'm gonna come back
And
later.
it was great. And I really appreciated that, honestly. And okay, so bring this back because I will go on a million tangents. So two things I want to say before we even dive in. I want to give a little bit of background on what colorism is, because
Mm,
not everybody may know. And we all grow and we learn at different levels. And I
right.
think anyone who's listening to this show, I never want anyone to feel any sort of shame because they don't know about a certain subject. Like, I think everybody was exposed to a lot of things in 2020, and we're all learning at different paces. So anyway, colorism, for anyone who doesn't know, and I got my notes open over here, Dawnette, because I'm
Oh,
a
she got
professional.
definitions.
Come
All
on
right.
now,
Come on,
yes.
Webster. Let's go.
I'm dead.
Colorism is defined as the prejudicial and preferential treatment of same race people based solely on their color. And this term was coined in 1982 by Pulitzer Prize winner Alice Walker. Shout out to Alice. Thanks,
Oh,
girl.
okay.
And colorism is a global issue, just to be clear with everyone. I think sometimes, a lot of times, racial issues, racial topics get just tied to the Western world, and it's global. But in the United States, colorism evolved from slavery. Enslavers
Mm,
typically gave preferential treatment to enslaved people with fair complexions. And by fair treatment, I think the best way to simplify this is house slaves versus field slaves. Okay. Which,
mm-hmm.
side note, that distinction is important, but also not a dismissal, because everybody was enslaved at the end of
Right,
the day.
right.
So just, that's a baseline as well. And I think we can all surmise that the damage of slavery, like on the mind, the body, the soul, it's really multidimensional, just as multidimensional as colorism. So
Mm-hmm.
I say that because those lighter complexions of house slaves also, I think people sometimes forget the history of that. That's the product of rape. So everything is rooted really in a lot of trauma when we're talking about colorism, no matter your hue. And number two, blackness, if anyone hasn't guessed it yet, it's a spectrum.
Mm,
So colorism is often, relative to environment as well. So for example, for myself, in some circles, I'm considered light skinned. But then in other circles, I'm brown or I'm medium. you know? Everyone has almost like these different sorts of ways that they defined colorism in a way, or their own color. My childhood personally was sprinkled with comments, compliments, and sometimes resentment, you know, towards my
Mm.
appearance. And in the same token, I find it equally as important to acknowledge that privilege and to use it as a platform to course correct people when I can, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that leads to why we're here, because the reality is colorism is not a conversation of the past. It's not a conversation for activists. It's infused in mainstream media. It's projected on people of
Yeah.
all ages, and it's actually caused a great deal of tension and disdain within the Black community, particularly I would say among women. And I
Mm.
think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to know that for today's conversation, when I'm talking about colorism and the spectrum, I'm thinking like Zendaya in opposition to Lupita. Like
Mm.
that's
Okay. Yeah.
that's like what I'm thinking of, you know, when I'm thinking of the distinction here. So, and when we think of the
Mm-hmm.
milestones with entertainment, lighter skinned people often break barriers sooner than darker skinned people, you know. Brandy won an Emmy in 1997 for Cinderella. Remember that movie?
Yes, I have it on
So
DVD. It's
good.
my
Come on up,
favorite.
Roger
Don't
and
tell me nothing. That's
Hammerstein.
who Cinderella is to me. Sorry, I'm just
No, 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 because that's the tea. My Cinderella has braids.
you know.
But prior to her winning, the two most prominent Black women we know of who won were, you know, was Lena Horne. You know, she was the first major
Mm.
actress to sign a deal. You know, and who, you know, Black and white films, Lena Horne can be white passing. And then we
Yeah.
have Halle Berry, who won the Best Actress Academy Award. You know, and we also have it in music. We have rappers spanning from Kanye West to Kodak Black. You know, they fetishize light skinned women, they
Mm-hmm.
defeminize dark skinned women. We have shows from every era, from Martin, The Proud Family, to most recently In the Heights, where we see a
Yeah, I've
stigma
heard.
around darker skin, or we just don't see any representation at all. And then we
Mm-hmm.
have the reverse, where we have someone like Meghan Markle, who it seems like the one drop rule still exists in the monarchy. So, you know, colorism is this strange two-way mirror. You know, while light skinned people may appear to be more privileged because of their
Mm-hmm.
proximity to whiteness, the reality is they're just more palatable to white people, you know? And there's a sacrifice in identity that comes with being tokenized. So, and obviously this spreads in different ways. There's shocking statistics about prison, about political access to things, finances. The reality is like socially, financially, mentally, at every level, colorism impacts people. So, with all that being said, you know, I usually separate these conversations into buckets, but this is such a broad issue that I like turned to the internets and I was like, what are common
Ooh.
questions about colorism that we can just riff off of each other? And I
Mm-hmm.
also asked on, you know, on Instagram, you know, what are questions or thoughts that people often have about this topic, but maybe feel judgment and so they don't say it out loud. So I
Ooh.
think we're just gonna start with the basics first on it, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna give you the floor, and we can just kind of go from there.
Okay.
But my first question for you is, you know, how do you think colorism shows up in your life?
Oh, how does colorism show up in my life? It The thing about it is it's that's such a
And it's
tricky
okay if it
question.
doesn't, or if it feels like,
Oh no,
because
girl,
it
it
depends.
does. It definitely does. It wasn't a question of if not, it's more of
Mm,
just how much,
right.
because the
Ooh.
way I because it's more so like any, and I feel like you did such a great job in laying the foundations. I was taking like mental notes, because something that you definitely said that I was just like, and there it is, because you can take that same kind of logic and drop it over into colorism, where you had the conversation of house slave versus field slaves. And
Hmm.
it was this concept that, like, if you're out in the sun working, you're going to get darker. Even if you're brown,
Yeah.
you're going to tan. So, and that created some animosity, because you're out in the field and you understand that the house slave is still a slave, but at least they're inside,
Hmm.
you know
Right.
but at the
Right.
end of the day, they're all being oppressed and being forced to do labor and are treated as such. It's the same thing with colorism, because, and I feel like, or at least from what I've seen, from people who are lighter skinned. When we talk about colorism, there's like a defensiveness that ends up happening, because I think sometimes the confusion is that colorism means that, oh, I have privilege. That means you're trying to say I don't face racism. I'm just like, no, they're different. A Black person is
Mm.
always going to face racism in the way society is set up at this moment. But so we all face racism, but in the spaces that Black people are allowed, they will allow more people who have, Eurocentric features or who have lighter skin through those doors. Because at the end of the day, I love Zendaya. I love Yara. I love all these young women, especially because they're so unapologetically Black, or they're so
Mm.
unapologetic about their Blackness, and uplifting and, like, making sure that they're not the only ones in the room, and trying to, like, use their privilege to the benefit of others. But you definitely know that colorism is still very much a thing. And I think of one of my examples I always think of is that Kanye line where he was just like, get a couple of light skins and Kelly Rowlands, where it
Yeah,
was just like,
yeah.
your standard is
Oof.
just be light. But if
Yeah,
you're gonna be dark, at least come in at Kelly Rowland. And I'm just like, bruh,
right.
you ain't, I mean, Kelly
And
Rowland's
it's
gorgeous,
crazy.
but
Kelly Rowland
yeah,
is
so
gorgeous, but
gorgeous.
and it's funny you say that because a lot of times those sorts of comments are perpetuated by dark-skinned men. And I very much remember
Hmm.
in college, one of my friends did this project where she interviewed Black men about basically their dating preferences. It was something along those lines. And
Hmm.
one person straight up said, I date dark skinned women, but I would marry a light skinned woman. And when they asked why, this person literally was like, because my kids will come out lighter and they have a better chance of making it in the world, which
And
is
yeah.
insane. Because really, what that, and actually, that brings me to the next question I want to ask you, because I think a lot
Hmm.
of things with colorism are tied to the fact with our standards for everything are tied to the proximity of whiteness. That's what like
Hmm.
equals success. Like the lighter you are, the more Eurocentric your features are, the more white people can digest you, and
Mm.
that somehow we equate that to mean then that you're achieving success now because a white person finds you acceptable. But that's anti-black in and of
Yeah.
itself,
I mean,
because you're
absolutely.
suggesting, and that's white supremacy, you're suggesting that whiteness is what we should all be aspiring to, which personally, that's a no for me. But
Hmm. Yeah, for me as well.
my question is, how do you think, so we, I think, have an understanding of colorism, and
Mm.
it can be like within the Black community that I think is, there's a lot of tension behind it, and I think there's a lot of animosity. I think there
Hmm.
is definitely a lot of defensiveness, because I think
Yeah.
people feel then that they have to prove that they're Black in some sort of way, or that they're never
Hmm.
enough, right? But the reality is this all stems from white supremacist systems. So
Yeah.
how do you, do
Hmm.
you think white people have an understanding of what colorism is?
um, do I? No, not really. I think, well, first, I want to go back to your original question, because I think, like, I don't know if I really answered it, because racism affects every aspect of my life. But I do feel like colorism does as well, because as a
Mm,
dark skinned Black woman, there are just certain ways, like, I can anticipate how I'm perceived. Yeah, especially within like Black men, you see that a lot, where they're a preference,
mm,
or they'll, like, dress it as a preference,
right.
and say all these things. But I identify as queer, I'm plus size, I'm dark skinned, so growing up, I already know that I'm perceived as if though I should know my place in the world. And I feel like that's like a
Mm,
really important, like, note, where it's kind of like, because I'll never forget, oh my gosh, you remind me of this story where this man kind of approached me. And you already know I'm in a long-term relationship with someone.
mm-hmm.
I also just don't like to be bothered. I always joke I was a cat in a previous life, and before then I was a turtle. So I just,
I think you're both spirit
honestly,
animals.
honestly, I really do, because I just am a homebody, but in its
Mm,
truest definition. So this guy like approached me while I was actually waiting for my partner at like a train station. And you're conditioned to be very polite when you say
right.
no, because you never know what's going to happen. So I was very polite and just be like, no, thank you, I'm fine. And you would have thought that I just like killed his moms. Like, he was so
Wow.
offended. And
Ooh.
it was to the point where he kept asking me, but it was no longer like, oh, can you? It was more like, are you serious? Like, you're turning me down? Because
Wow.
he was like,
Wow.
he was a lighter skinned man. And I guess some people would
Wow.
find him attractive, but I was also just like, I'm not
Into you.
interested.
Bye.
And it was that kind of reaction where it was just kind of like, you're not supposed to say no to me. Like, you're
Right.
supposed to be grateful
Wow.
that
Wow.
I would, approach you. And we
Right.
know that some people, because I don't want to be heteronormative, she's queer too. But I don't want to be heteronormative that, but some people bank on that. They
Yeah,
purposely
they
go for
do.
people because they know that if you have low self-esteem, or if you have low self-worth, they're better
You're more
able to
likely.
manipulate. Yeah, you're more
Yeah.
likely, or they're more likely to manipulate you into kind
Wow.
of feeding off and knowing that they're can prey on you in that way.
Yeah.
So I think, and for me, it took a lot of like work and unconditioning, and I feel like that's the journey for everyone, because once you learn that, you know I think I read somewhere long ago that your first thought is what you've been told to think. And then your second thought, or how you react to your thought, is really how you are. So kind of learning,
Mm.
like, what have you been conditioned to think? And I had to do that internally, and also find my internalized racism, my internalized misogyny, and just do a lot of self work that I'm still doing and still learning. So yeah, I feel like it does, because it affects more so where it's just kind of like, even if I'm no longer in that place where I'm just kind of like grasping for attention or wanting people to validate me, um it's still kind of like push you in a mood where you kind of anticipate how people can like react to you or expect you to respond and
Right.
navigate the world. Do I think white people know about colorism? I think on paper.
Mm.
I think they're getting a better idea of it, especially, I would say, like, young white liberals, and bless their heart, they do try. Um,
They really,
they
they really
really
do.
do. They
They
really,
really
really
do.
do.
I know they
Sometimes,
do. I
sometimes I
live
say,
with
I'm
a
just
few.
like, honestly, like, sometimes they're tiring too, where I'm just like, I appreciate you trying, but sometimes I'd rather just deal with a racist because
Sometimes
I
people
know where
try
they
too
are.
much.
Yes, they try
and
too
and
much.
I'm gonna give you an example. I don't think you were here for this, but this was also at the place that we used to work together.
Mm,
This person was a supervisor. I'll just say that. And I had long, I don't have hair no more, y'all, but once upon a time, I used to have long braids all the time in different colors. Dawnette knows, she's known me that
yeah.
long.
Yeah, you used to rock it
And
too.
I thank you. Every once in a while I miss them, but they were heavy. So
They are.
so I got them extra long this time, and I think they were like red. So, I was going for a whole Rihanna look. But anyway.
I remember your red
So,
braids. I know exactly. Yes,
you know
I'm
the
there with
look.
you.
So this person, comes up to me, and every time I changed my hair, somebody had something to say. I was one of the few people of color in the office, and so you
Hmm.
become tokenized in some way. And quite
Hmm.
frankly, when you're light skinned or lighter skinned and you sound like I do, people just assume that you're their new black friend to like learn from. Like, it's just I don't
Ooh,
know.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
weird
We could talk
that's
about being the black friend too.
yeah, and that's what it's this weird space you exist in,
Hmm.
but this person came up and complimented my hair, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, your hair looks beautiful. You look like Rapunzel." I was like, "Thank you. I appreciate that." And then this person goes, "A black Rapunzel." Bro, I literally just like didn't know how to respond. I was like, "Thank you." I was like, "What?" And I remember
And you,
my colleague next to me, who is still a wonderful friend, like stopped typing and just like looked over like, "Are you serious? Like, you just said that?" And I was like, that was a moment where it's like, you are trying to be a super ally. Like, sis, the comparison was to having long hair. Like, Rapunzel doesn't I don't have to be like, I get it. Like, it was about the
I
hair
was
being
just,
long. That's it. That's all it was about, girl. Like, that's it.
and I heard in that between Rapunzel and Black Rapunzel, they were just like, "Oh no, I made a mistake.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
have to correct
I
myself."
just said a white character. Oh my god, I can't make a comparison between a white character and a black person. Like, it was so
Oh, no,
funny.
no, no. I must specify that
Yeah, it
you,
was
young negress,
hilarious.
are the Black Rapunzel.
I'm dead. No, it was hilarious. It was really funny, but in a very, very cringy sort of way. It was
Yes,
like,
yes,
are you
absolutely.
serious right now? So that's just an ode to my super allies out there. Take a break, y'all. Like we see
You
you, but
know.
just take a break. You don't have to like course correct every single thing you say. Like it's all right.
You know, and
Don't
it's so
help
funny
us.
because like you reminded me of a similar situation, same place, and the person actually is someone I consider a friend, and I would hang out. We hung out a couple of times and went out for dinner, and it was one of those things where it didn't have to be said, but I could tell that she knew, and it was
Mm.
fine because it was like, what happened? So I have locks. And at the time, like now I'm just too lazy. They're also pretty long now, so it's just like too
I was
much
gonna
work.
say, I
Uh,
don't think you have to do much.
No, I don't. But sometimes, back in the day, I was like, oh, I'll make them curly. I'm gonna do like
Yeah, like a
little
little
lock knots,
updo. They look good
like an
though. They really
updo.
have.
Thank
They
you,
really
thank
are
you.
long.
Yeah, and that's why it was like just a twist and a wash. That's all we're doing. Um, but back in the day, I remember I used to do this technique where you essentially would twist your lock onto itself. And when you would take it out, it would be extremely curly. But when you have it in it, you can almost mock like an afro a little bit. So
Mm.
like my hair would look like it was not even at my shoulders. Like it was kind of like
Oh,
Shirley Temple,
cute,
honestly.
cute.
It was like really cute. But one of the reasons why I hate kind of doing that is, as you know,
Oh no,
that as soon as you change your hair, that is
that's
the talk
it.
of the town. That
Jesus,
is, and and for a lot of white people, they're just like, oh my God, your
it's
hair.
too much. It's too
It's
much.
just,
It's an
it's
exhibit.
just, honestly, yeah, that's what it feels like. You feel like you're on view. And I'm
Yeah,
just like, as somebody who doesn't like attention to themselves, I like to like lurk in the shadows. I'm just like,
yeah.
that's too much. But I'll never forget because again, we were close. She was just like, oh, I like your hair. And I'm like, oh, thank you. And then I saw her like reach her
No,
hand
no,
out.
no. I'm so sorry.
she reached
I'm like
she
triggered.
reached her hand out. And I don't know. I wish someone took a photo of it because I just remember looking at her hand coming at me and I don't know what face I made, but I just also saw her hand like shrink back.
As it
Like there was
should. As it
something about my
should.
face just told me don't.
You know
Just
what?
don't.
And kudos to her for recognizing that your face was saying, back the F off, like, get away
I
from
really
me.
was.
The whole thing, I think, ties back into that question where we were talking about, do white people recognize colorism? I, I, I think you're right that it's on paper, but to that end, so I was having a conversation with one of my friends about this, and something that she mentioned to me was she is of a lighter complexion and she dated a white person for a pretty long period of time. And she was
Mm,
saying that when she was in those all white spaces with that person's family, she doesn't think that they saw her as a light skinned black person. Like they just saw her as a black person, you know? And
mm, yeah.
that was kind of their picture of her. So I think that's where her conflict sometimes comes from with
Hmm.
colorism because in certain spaces, no matter what your hue is, you still encounter that sort of feeling of being othered, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
I think even when a light skinned black person finds themselves winning the Academy Award or finds themselves in the corporate office, you know, there's a part of you that almost feels shame because, yes, you were able to make it ahead, but you know very full well that it may not be entirely, you know, you get tokenized in a way, like you're black
Hmm.
enough that they can use you as some sort of statistic to say that they've got people of color on their staff, but
Yeah.
you're not respected enough for you to be spoken at the same level a white person is. You know, it's this very strange space exist in with white people, and then you go back to your own community and you're basically told that you think you're better than us, you think you're prettier than us, you think this, you think that, you're not black enough. So I think
Hmm.
that angle often doesn't get spoken about because the reality is, I think the privilege that people experience as light skinned people kind of feels like a better deal, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I mean, it is. Yeah, I would think so. But again, I'm speaking from someone who is like who is considered dark skinned.
Right.
So I'm always going to be, and it's kind of because I know there's so many conversations around colorism, and like you said in the beginning, I always try to come at it from a space of compassion, of trying to
Mm.
really understand where the other person is coming from. And I completely get that for light skinned people or even biracial people or
Mm-hmm.
multiracial people, it can be invalidating, or they are invalidated of their identity, where, their blackness is kind of like not act or not realized or recognized, because while they're allowed to be in white spaces, they still face racism, they still face discrimination. And then when they enter black spaces, there is, if they are a femme, they're going to be preferred by,
Mm-hmm.
the opposite gender, or put on a pedestal. And then that also creates animosity within, for darker skinned femmes who feel like, what, oh, you think you're better than me, you're doing all this other stuff. It reminds me of the dichotomy between those two documentaries, Dark Skin or Dark Girls and Light Girls,
Mm.
that came out. And I remember I just sat there and had to laugh because Dark Girls came first, and it was just kind of like this conversation between various people. It was also, little fun fact, the first time at least I was introduced to Viola Davis, because she was
Wow.
featured in that documentary, or
Which
she
is
spoke to
insane.
her, who
Because sis has
the
been working for a long time, okay? And that's
sis
just
is an icon. She is a
truly, it's
legend.
really
She is
ridiculous.
the auntie in my
I,
mind,
j-
like really and truly.
I really
She
get
is.
upset when people act like her most iconic moment was like taking her brows off on TV. I'm like, y'all have no idea. Y'all have no idea. Y'all
Listen,
thought because you
listen.
saw someone go natural for the first time on TV that all of a sudden she's worthy of being celebrated. Sis was always worthy of being celebrated.
You telling me that homegirl
Ridiculous.
pulled out all that snot and dribble for fences, and you gonna tell me her taking off her makeup is her most iconic? The
Can we talk
range this
about doubt?
actress
Can
has,
we talk about doubt? Sis
like,
had one scene and won an
one
award.
scene,
One
one
scene,
scene. Like, don't put some respect on her name. Come
period.
on.
Anyway, let's get back to what you were saying. I'm so sorry. We had
But
we
right,
had to take it there for a moment though,
I
because
know, I know.
it really
But yes,
astounds me.
love Viola Davis. She's hands down one of my favorite
Queen.
actresses. But yeah, so she was in there, and like, I the documentary I felt like was a really good exploration and conversation about various people talking what it's like to grow up where you're told from a very young age your skin is not valued, you
Mm.
are, placed within the hierarchy of things, like even within the black community you're at the bottom. And then it does this weird kind of pull where towards the end it's just like, but some people love us, so I guess we should be okay with fetishization. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, we take a
Yikes.
little bit of a left there. You had me in the first half.
Yeah.
But so that one, so this is to say that I have like critique. I'm a Virgo, I'm gonna always have opinions and critiques.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, but I felt like it was a good exploration. But it was also like, first, the quality, it was giving me like, them old camcorders, the one that
Okay,
actually had the
okay.
tape you had to put in. Like, it
Ooh,
was
okay.
giving you
It
that
was giving you
quality.
back in the day, back in the day.
Hey, yes,
Period.
exactly. It was giving exactly that. And then because of the conversation that started, a few years later, you had Light Girls, the documentary, come out, which was
Mm.
produced by OWN. This is when Oprah Winfrey had her channel. And just the quality alone, I'm just like, I mean, like, it writes itself. Here
Wow.
you have Dark Girls, the documentary, looking like, it had a lower production
Right,
value.
right.
And then Light Girls
They invested
had
more money into it.
it had a bigger budget. And then I watched it because I was also trying to be like, okay, let's just watch it and see, like, really get an understanding of it. And I do feel like I wish they took more time to dive into it, because outside of like two moments, one where somebody did exactly what you did, where they talked about the history of colorism and how it plagues our community and actually causes a lot of rifts. And then there was this other part where they had a room full of black women and just talking about it, of all different
Mm.
shades, talking about it. The majority of the rest of it was, I shit you not, was just back to back people going like, people think I'm, or one time a dark skinned girl was like rude to me or something along those lines, where it kind of like
Ugh,
trivialized it to like these individual, where is perpetuated this idea that like, oh, people don't like me, or people, they're just jealous of me or something along those lines. And I was just
Jesus.
like, there's so much they could talk about, like,
Right.
what we talked about, where there's like that invalidation, there's that inner turmoil or tension or
Yeah.
intra-community problems that it brings up. And I feel like they just reduced it to, like, dark skinned women be bitter,
Right.
and it is what it is.
And so, oh
um
my gosh, Dawnette, you are like flowing through my questions. First of all, sis, like, I come on. Why does that feel just like rainbow pride to me? We're just like out here flowing, out here
yes,
being fluid. Period. Come
out
on.
and free, yes.
Yes. But that's so interesting that you say that, because my next question was, I think we can definitely tell that colorism is perpetuated in the media. And honestly,
Mhm.
even in white media, you always see, like, I don't know, I think of like different stories where, like, there's always like the lighter skinned friend, and like their best friend is like a darker skinned woman. And like the
Oh
dark,
yeah, absolutely.
and I mean, I think like Dear White People is definitely a perfect example of that. Although the
Hmm.
story is predicated on the fact that the main character is a mixed woman who, battles with her identity. But it's very
Hmm.
interesting because they explore her best friend's narrative of being a darker skinned black woman, kind of being her sidekick. And I feel like that's always kind
Hmm.
of been the narrative. I think of the Proud family, I think of Penny Proud, and then
Yep,
I think of
thought of that one.
Dejanay. Sis has her stomach hanging out. Like, they always make someone a little more ghetto. I think of Martin.
Yeah.
You have Pam in
Yep.
comparison to Gina, and Martin was always making jokes about Pam and what she looks like and calling her
Yep.
ugly. And these are
That was
things
cute. Her
that
looks were always at the expense of the jokes.
always,
And then also, I would
always.
say the third most popular female character was just him dressed up
Right.
in a wig.
I was going to say we could also navigate into how that show is incredibly transphobic and homophobic, but we're not going to go there today.
Yeah, that's one of
it's
the
it's a it's
shows
also a
that
tricky one.
it's hard for me to return to, because I know everyone's on like the nostalgia vibe, things are
Yeah.
coming back. And Martin is the one where I'm just like, it is hilarious, but it's hard to like watch it
It's a
and not be
problematic
like,
fave. It's a problematic
it
fave.
is. Yeah.
Truly. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to get us back on track because we're rounding up on our
Yes,
hour,
yes,
and I know
yes.
we're going to have more stuff to talk about. But I do want to kind of go back to that question where we were talking about how
Mm,
colorism is perpetuated in the media.
mm,
Can you think of examples where you feel like you've seen colorism perpetuated in the media? I think the first thing I always think of is, it's funny that you mentioned Zendaya and Yara in the beginning, because I feel like I really appreciate both those actresses. I think I agree that they're very
mhm,
strong activists, but I think what's often missing, what I'm missing from them, is them talking about subjects like colorism when they're talking about race. I don't think I've ever heard
mm,
Zendaya or Yara Shahidi acknowledge, what that intersectionality might be like for their
mm,
colleagues, and what space they can be making in the Hollywood industry. Like, what conversations should they be
mhm.
having? Like, I think nobody wants to really take that on.
I don't know, because it's a slippery slope, because that's the other thing about being in such a social space where everyone is so used to people like putting your information out there, all of your thoughts. Because some people are just like, they're kind of quiet, because I actually
Mm.
don't, if you really
Zendaya
think
is
about it,
very
Zendaya
quiet.
doesn't really, she's
She
really
doesn't.
quiet. So you can't negate what they're doing behind the scenes, but we're in
Sure.
a culture where it's just kind of like, it feels like a catch 22, because people are just like, well, I want to hear your thoughts, say something.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you do something, they're just like, oh, you're just doing it for
And she's
notoriety or
also
clout.
biracial, so I feel like it's
Hmm.
trickier in other ways.
So I
Amanda
remember,
Stenberg, I think that's how you say
yeah,
her last name.
something like that.
Okay.
But I feel like there was a story a while ago where we were all in the hype, all like feeling ourselves, living our best life when, Black Panther came out. It was just nothing but black parties everywhere. And,
Period. Boom.
black is not on the monolith, but that was the closest we all came together with
For
our fists
real,
out.
for real. The
We
pride,
were,
pride was on another level.
couldn't tell us anything.
Period.
And I remember, I think they said that they turned down a role on that movie, if I
Mm.
remember the story correctly, because they didn't want to take away from, they didn't want to be in that space as
Yeah.
a lighter skinned black person.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
from one point, I was just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense and I understand that. But I guess from the way they said it, a lot of people actually took great issue because they were just like, you're making it about yourself. And,
Mm.
and then it was kind of like, well, here's this, light skinned person wanting a pat on the back because, they stepped out of the way and
You
all this
can't
other
win
stuff.
though. You can't
And
win.
I think that's what it is. Like you can't, it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So
That's
that's why
true.
part of me is
That's
like,
very real.
eh,
I think
yeah.
I think where it stems from for me is, so actually this whole conversation and this whole topic, it actually stemmed from Zendaya, because I can't
Mm,
remember what cover she was on. It might have been like Vogue, Elle, one of those sort of bigger names. And her stylist is Law Roach, who Law Roach is an incredible stylist, y'all. And he's also a judge on the ballroom competition show Legendary. I'll talk about it in the rec
mm.
room, but y'all gotta watch the show. But he styled her for this magazine cover, and it was like kind of set like as like a 50s housewife, and he has her like in a blonde bouffant wig. She looks good. Sis is stunning. Okay, sis is just
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
she's just the cutest little string bean out there, so this is no shade to her. Basically what he was saying is like, I want to show that a black woman can wear blonde hair, and a black woman can dress up like a housewife and just be just as polished, and and kind of like show that
Hmm.
dichotomy. And
Okay.
the
All right.
only reason it was problematic to me was because, one, like, black women have like been wearing different hair colors for years. Like, if no one can imagine
Yeah,
us in
it's.
blonde hair, then where have you been
I mean,
living?
like Little Kim was out here with multicolor wigs in the 90s. She was very inspired by dancehall culture. And that's very big within, a lot of Jamaican spaces to wear. Like, I remember one of my favorite movies growing up, Dancehall Queen, she practically had like streamers in her hair, those little
That's
like
what I'm
tinsels that you throw up
saying. It
on
was
like
just
trees and
like,
stuff.
I just felt
Like,
like, yeah,
we've never shied away from
never
any of
from
that.
colors.
And yeah, and I think it goes back to that being digestible,
That's what I
being
mean.
kind
And
of, yeah.
that kind of was unsettling for me, because one, it was like, okay, first of all, black women have all sorts of hair colors. Like, we can
Mhm.
be born with all types of hair colors. You got redheaded people. Somebody might be born with blue hair. Who knows? Like, it was just kind of like interesting to me that that was a specific comment. And then the other thing was like, I get that like you have a black woman in a blonde wig, but Zendaya's proximity to whiteness is very, it's closer on the scale. So it almost felt like
Yeah.
this sort of digestible way for like white people to understand
Hmm.
the diversity of blackness. And it was like, but you're not really showcasing that, really. And it
No.
just felt like a very commodified and commercialized way to promote blackness. And that was really uncomfortable for me. That was really uncomfortable for me, because I just don't think that that's the way that we find progress. Like, I don't think that that's the conversation. That's the way to be having the conversation,
Mm.
because it kind of felt irresponsible, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I feel like it's running very parallel, or it's running within the same vein of respectability politics, where this idea that, in order to be allowed in certain spaces, you have to like look a certain way, you have to like spoon feed their culture, don't offend them, make them as comfortable as possible. But if there was anything that Meghan and Harry thing told you, that
Right.
Meghan is white passing.
Correct.
She is a biracial woman that, if she puts on the right wig, I may be able to tell she's something, but
Mm-hmm.
I would not be able to like immediately like, pinpoint her, especially because we live in a society that loves to categorize us.
Right.
So we're like, that's something we have all been conditioned to do, to be like, oh, you're white, you're Asian, you're
Right.
black, instead of actually allowing people to be their cultures.
Yeah.
And because we all,
And their
like all
identity.
Asian people, are so different and their
Right.
own identity and define themselves. Um, but the mere fact that she has a child,
Right.
that is visually, you cannot tell
They asked this
what color
woman
they are.
if they were afraid how dark her child was going to be.
How dark her
How,
child, and the fact that the baby came out so light, but just the
but just the
knowledge
fact that
that
that's
that
even a
child has black
question.
in them,
Right.
it's like,
It's a
it's,
threat.
it's just even knowing.
It's
Hmm.
terrifying. And I think that also, like, that's a perfect example. Y'all, the same way I say race is stupid, so is colorism. And I'm not saying that to dismiss anybody. I'm saying that because you have someone like, if we really believe that being fair is what's going to get you
Mm.
ahead, then how come Meghan Markle almost killed herself over the monarchy? Like,
And there it is. Because I feel like that's the other thing too. Because, yeah, that's exactly it. Because that was the number one takeaway, is that you will never be enough.
Never.
No matter how light you
It
are,
does not
no matter
matter.
how close your whiteness is, at any moment your jig could be up and they can
Correct.
pull the rug from out of you.
So nobody needs to
Because
be acting like they're brand new or better than anybody, y'all. You're still blackity-black-black at the end of the day. When it gets to the very
yeah,
end of the line, you can only get so far. You might get to the very top of the Chrysler Tower, okay? And there's going to be someone there to throw you off if they want your job, and they're going to give it to them,
exactly.
okay?
Exactly. So, yeah, so going back to it's kind of like holding up this idea that we also know doesn't really work. It's the same thing with the whole thing with said it yet, but the bonnet situation
Oh, oh my
with
gosh. I don't
Monique.
Monique. That was
Monique.
very
But it's this idea that, like if you make sure your hair is always good and you
yeah.
speak a certain way and you don't move suddenly and you make sure you don't talk with your hands too much, don't laugh too loud. But at the end of the day, it's all survival,
Mhm.
especially from the older generation. This is what they have been spoon fed to make sure, just like, hey, remember at the end of the day, it's not just about being like, respectable to white people. It's about surviving. It's
Right.
about making sure you get home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because if you act too out of line, if you get too out of pocket and you scared, I remember there's this video that I just saw where this South African man, I think, is married to a white woman, but it was something that happened in Hawaii where he went to a place that, a house that I think he knew the person, but I think the person was renting it out. So he walked in after the couple that was there, and the white woman got so scared. Mind you, he walked in, he was like, oh, read the situation. He was like, my
Right.
bad, I'm leaving, kept apologizing,
Wow.
and left, absolutely left. And she was
Wow.
crying in tears,
Wow.
hysterical on the 911 call, talking about how this person is there. Oh, he just left. This is what his car looks like.
Wow.
And he's now dead.
Wow.
He is now dead because the cops finally found him, and he was resisting, and because of that white woman's fear, you lose. Like, that's what's on the line for
That's the
us. So
reality.
that's why, even though I don't agree with Monique, I don't agree with LaRoche, I understand where they're coming from, because at the end of the
Mm,
day, you're going to do whatever it takes you think is going to make you survive in
right.
this world that is oppressing us.
And we're raised
So
that way. Honestly, I know for me,
yeah.
I do obviously know about African American culture, but I was
Mm,
raised in a Caribbean household, and
same.
in a Haitian household. I'm sure it's the same in a Jamaican household. You really, it's the same, I think, in any Caribbean household, really. Presentation is everything. Like, you don't go
Yep.
out with socks and slides. You don't go out looking messy. You don't go out, you definitely don't wear a bonnet on your head going outside.
You gotta look
I mean, you have to
respectable.
look respectable always. I remember, like, even if I like had a hole in an undershirt, my dad would be like, Clara, which is my mom's name, Dashka has a hole in her undershirt. She's about to go outside. I'm like, you're a tattletale,
Yo.
bro. You're a
Stop his
snitch.
snitching. Wow.
You're a
We
mother. How
like
you do me
that.
like that? But no, for real.
Wow.
And that, but you know what I did? I would be like, no, no, and I would go change my shirt, bro. Like,
Exactly. And yeah, that's really big. It's just making sure that, like, and be it like your physical
right.
presentation, the family
Especially as
dynamic.
women, don't be, listen, I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I hit a certain age, it was very evident, that my body was
Mm-hmm.
developing or whatever. And I mean, every Caribbean family also has a creepy Caribbean uncle. And so those were things I was made to be cognizant of, like how you're dressing, how you're carrying yourself, how you're
Yeah.
speaking, how loud you are. Is it ladylike? Is it digestible?
Yeah.
Will it help you get ahead? Are you going to get a job? I remember when I first got my tattoos, like, my mom's greatest concern was like, people are going to think like you're a criminal. People are going to think that, like, no, people are going to think like you're a wild
Yeah.
girl. People are going to think this. I remember the first time, like, I went to hang out with a boyfriend, like, at his house. My mom was like, people are going to think you're loose. Like, there's these very,
Loose, you're
like,
gonna come back pregnant. Like,
there's
there's
these
so
very
many different
extreme
ways.
ways of thinking. And it's
Hmm.
literally because I think our generation and the generation coming after us,
Mm.
we are finally in a space now where we recognize that that is not a way to live,
Yeah.
that that's not like, surviving is not living, like, trying to
Hmm.
operate within a system that oppresses you and trying to find a way through it is not living. Actually dismantling that oppressive system that work, we don't really get to live that much more per se, but we're making sure that the
Yeah.
people who come after us get to. That's the whole idea.
Absolutely. And I think such a great way to put it, in that that's the difference, because surviving means that you've understood that there's nothing you can do to change the system.
Right.
And and I think that's the other thing that I always try to be mindful of, is in our moving forward towards progression, because I think I would say the same thing within the queer community. You can't, like, because I feel like one thing I hate to see is when people shit on the people that were there before,
Mm,
as if like that's not the language they had, that's not what they felt like they had to do, or that's not what they came to do.
right.
It's not to invalidate what they did, but it's also to understand and open up the possibility, because I feel like when it comes to respectability politics and this idea that if you act a certain way you'll be able to survive, they didn't come from the understanding that there was a possibility to dismantle the system
Right.
altogether.
Right.
And I feel like for millennials and Gen Z's, we are coming to realize that actually this system is pretty fickle.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove a few pillars here and there,
Yep.
and there is much more of a wanting and desire to, instead of just police ourselves as if we've been taught to do,
Yeah.
is to actually be like, actually I won't engage with this, or no, I'm going to change it, or I'm going to completely put it up on top of its head and do that. I will say though, one thing that I've heard is that, because it's the same thing that happened, I don't know what generation is like the flower child,
The
but like the
60s,
60s
70s.
and all that. But apparently there's like this trend that always happens, that whenever there's like a very progressive generation that's known to be progressive, the next generation tends to be
Super
counter
conservative.
to it,
Yeah.
and tends to be super conservative. So the next one is Generation Alpha, which also, I mean, like, I stand the
Uh-oh.
name. Like, wow,
Is it all
what
the
a name.
I know, but is it
It's the babies. It's
yeah, but
literally the babies
is it
right
the
now.
babies born
But
in COVID? What does that mean for us?
I'm curious what if Gen Alpha, like, carries the baton, or if
I
they
mean,
become like the
things are
people that are just like, oh no,
yeah.
they were wild.
I really hope not. I hope that like I don't know. I feel like the energy of the world has truly, truly shifted in a way
It
where
is
a
shifting.
lot of systems are just kind of like falling away. They're just no longer sustainable.
Hmm.
A system like racism or white supremacy, y'all, is not sustainable. It's really not, because the reality is
It's
it,
it's not there.
it's not.
Yeah, it's so much, isn't, like, even if you really and truly think about it, like everything this country was kind of built on is not sustainable, because this country was built off of slave labor, thus making sure, or putting this standard of this foundation, that in order for things to succeed you have to exploit people. It's built off of exploitation.
Literally.
Once a slave for free, then you have, indentured servitude, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where, you start having other cultures come in. There's always this idea of exploitation, and now, there's this ongoing conversation around raising the minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
and, talking about like how right now we're so anti-union, but there are more and more people like becoming unionized again,
Right.
because like this country has built it off where it's just like there's no way, they don't know how to survive without exploitation, because they've never done it.
Right.
They've never had a point
I
in
mean, the
history where
question
they had.
often is
Yeah.
like, we're sitting here and we're talking about colorism, but a question I often ask y'all is like, and this is no shade to anyone, but who are white people without people of color?
Ooh. And one of my favorite lines, from the late great, and I can't remember her name all of a sudden. It's just, when you want to bring it up, it's not there. Bluest Eye.
Toni
Because
Morrison, my bae,
Toni
my
Morrison,
bae.
Toni Morrison and James Baldwin like those two are like my favorite thinkers. Like, oh gosh, to be able to
James
sit in a room with
Baldwin is a
them.
beautiful human being.
So yes. But Toni Morrison has this interview where she just flat out say, like, who are you? Like, if you need to have someone stand on their knees in order for you to be tall,
Right.
like
What is
like
that?
how do you, like, if you can only feel good about yourself by making sure the other person feels bad about themselves, are you really at a point where you can really at a point and say that you're superior?
Yeah.
Because your superiority is solely dependent on me being inferior to you.
Right.
So I'm just like,
And that's not real power, y'all. It's really not at the
it
end of the
isn't.
day. But
It
that takes us
isn't.
back. I'm going to steer us back. I have two last questions, and they're tied to education. And
Yeah.
I really,
Ooh.
yeah, I know you'll love that. But I wanted to bring in a few thoughts that were shared on social media by a couple of people. This is
Ooh.
really tied to how we look at progress when we're talking about colorism. And I thought this was an
Mm-hmm.
interesting point because we've been talking a little bit anti-blackness at a certain point. We've kind of, as always, I
Mm-hmm.
always go on a roller coaster with these conversations and I love it. But we spoke about
Mm-hmm.
anti-blackness, but at a certain point we also spoke about whiteness kind of being the standard, whether we're talking about beauty, whether we're talking about success, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And we dipped a little bit into talking about the fact that Zendaya is biracial and how sometimes that can be a challenging place to be. So this person's thought I thought was really great. They said, I think the conversation around interracial relationships solving America's racism is linked to anti-blackness and colorism. This idea of an
Mm.
ambiguous brownness that slowly erases the more unambiguous black features is cringe face. Once that was pointed out to me, I was like, oh, damn, lol, which is not a critique of interracial relationships, but more a critique of presenting them as solutions.
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I thought
I
that
do.
was a very
I
strong
I
point.
it's such a strong point, and I think that's always my issue with, because my thing is like when it comes to people, especially white women who are in interracial relationships, I actually tend to say clear, but not for the reasons they think I do. And that's
Mm,
because, one, I talked about in the beginning how um I being any type of marginalization, you already know how people perceive you.
sure.
So when it comes to like a white woman in, like, let's say let's just keep it using an example, because interracial, that's the other thing I hate, that it's always white and black, but I'm just like,
Right.
it could
In
be
this
any
context,
pairing.
yeah, but it
But
can
in
be
this
any
context,
pairing.
I'm going to use like a white woman with a black man.
Mm-hmm.
I know that they expect me to be the bitter black woman.
Mm.
They expect me to be like, oh, you took one of our good ones, and oh, I hate you. And I'm just like, I
Did
don't.
you though?
A part of me is just like, it's fine.
Have
Like, I
him.
don't. And not only that, but if somebody is just like purposely only dating white people, I rather you date them
Sure.
instead of like causing harm to a partner and
Sure.
making them feel like they're not enough.
Sure.
So I'm all for it. Go for who you want. So in my experience, again, I have to say that this is from my experience, not a perception, but this is what I've learned, is that I'm not that. And
Mm.
it's very clear that I'm not that. So because they know I'm not like that, then suddenly they want to like, they want to be my friend.
Yep.
And it's kind of like this, like, now it's just like, and you and I know, both know, there's a difference between being someone's friend and being someone's black friend.
Right.
And I've worked very hard to shed myself of all the people who I would be their black friend, and that the applications are closed. She's not taking any more. Like,
See,
she's done. She's
this
done.
position is
Like,
actually
I
no
don't,
longer available. This
no
position is no
longer
longer available.
available.
You
It's been
won't find it on.
dissolved.
You
We're
won't
so
find it on
sorry.
LinkedIn.
Absolutely not. And to me, there's also this other thing that ends up happening. And again, I feel like, I'm calling out white women, but
I mean,
that's who my
listen.
experience with.
That's the tea,
But
and most of the time,
yeah,
white women and black men for black women are often our greatest oppressors.
on both sides, because they do share a commonality where they have one foot in privilege and one foot
Exactly.
in being marginalized.
Yep.
Where for black men, it's because they are favored within a system that's patriarchal, but they're black, so
Right.
that's how they're oppressed. With women, they're white, so in
Right.
white supremacist country, they're favored, but they're face sexism because they're white women.
Exactly.
So that's why, to me, I always thought that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They really, they kiki together, they get it. um but
No tea, no
from what
shade.
I no tea, no shade. But the other thing I also realize is that sometimes with the people that I know that use, because they're in an interracial relationship, they confuse their proximity to blackness as if it's their own experience.
Mm.
And even like people who I know are well meaning, or like, or they like, it's almost like they get just as upset as you at a
Yeah.
problem, as if like, can you believe they're doing this to us? You're just like, us. When
Right.
did you when did you become? Hold up, wait a minute. let me see your ancestry DNA report, sis. What you doing? You can be an ally. You can, like, understand what your partner is going through, but you also have to be respectful and understand that at the end of the day, if you are not with your partner outside in a space, you don't take on their struggle in that
And
way.
not even that, but I know quite a few friends who were in interracial relationships. Some of, I know people who are in beautiful interracial relationships. And
Mm,
I think anyone who's in an interracial relationship, in any relationship, you have to learn to understand another person's experience and their identity.
yeah,
When it's interracial,
absolutely.
particularly between Black and white people, just given the context of the world that we live in, the
Mm-hmm.
tension, or I guess the effort, that it takes to understand each other's experiences, it's layered in different ways. And I
Yeah.
think a big thing too is, I think it's important for a white person in a relationship with a Black woman or a Black man, whomever they're in a relationship with, and white people in general, to recognize, like, you can fall in love with a person of color and love everything about them, but don't forget that they have to exist in the world. And when they walk
Right.
outside, the way that people are perceiving them because they're in a relationship with you brings a whole tidal wave of other assumptions and sort of prejudices. Okay, so I'm going to give you this other thought, and then we're going to finish out with
Mm.
our two questions. So, this other thought, the other response I got was, oh, actually, I just got one more, but I'm going to do this first
Oh,
one
so
and then we'll.
quick.
Okay,
Okay.
so we have ethnic ambiguity. This person says, I
Ooh.
know it's weird to say, but I changed colors. Hold on, let me continue here. I
So they
changed
tan.
colors for the season, correct? And
Mm.
I often have to respond to how I'm perceived, i.e., are you sure you're not biracial? You really look half Black. I get this every summer, and in a weird way, I have to toggle between identities based on how dark I am and how I might be received as a consequence of that. But it's something I feel like
Mm.
nobody talks about. I can't talk about it because I'm not actually Black. This person is Arab, but I'm perceived as
Mm.
biracial
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes. Does that make sense? And I said,
Yeah, absolutely.
I said it makes a lot of sense. Racial ambiguity is a really tender issue for a lot of people, and colorism
Mm-hmm.
perpetuates a lot of stereotypes and fetishization of people
Mm-hmm.
of color in ways that are
Yeah.
difficult to navigate. I think everybody code switches, and I
Yeah.
think racial ambiguity is a big thing. I have a very, good friend from work. Her background is of so many different identities, and I remember she shared with me her mother is a Black woman, and it was kind of crazy, the reactions when her mother finally came to the office, the amount of people who felt comfortable saying, like, oh, you are actually Black,
Oh. Ooh.
or
Well,
that's your
okay. All
mom,
right.
that's your mom.
Oh my
Like, the
God.
comfortability that
Okay.
people have with
It's
actually making people
that's
prove their identity is also very
so bold.
disturbing. It's so disturbing.
It's so bold. It's also like, because it's one thing to have that thought or to even be shocked, because when you see someone, because I definitely had that moment where there was this girl. I think she lives in Brooklyn now because I think I follow her. But she does not know. She probably does not remember me. But I definitely had a moment where I was just like, so what are you? Because she
Mm,
was just so ambiguous. Now I know that that's not something you ask somebody,
right,
especially
right.
someone you don't know that well.
But I
But
think it's an important thing, I think, for people to become
mm,
aware of and knowledgeable of. I've actually been asked that question before. I've had someone come up to me and be like, "What are you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Well, you have freckles on your nose." And I was like, "I didn't realize it was a crime for a Black
crime.
person to have freckles. I didn't, like,
It's
people will take anything that's a
mm,
Eurocentric feature and use
yeah.
that to then say that you no longer truly belong in this racial group." And I'm just like,
Oh my gosh, yeah,
what?
absolutely. I always think about an interview with Iman, the OG from like the
Mm.
90s
Oh,
supermodel,
yes. Come
where
on,
people
David
said
Bowie.
that, you know, and I remember she said in an interview how, people said that she had Eurocentric features. She was like, I have East African features. Like,
Period. And people really struggle that ends up, I think, trickling down into how people perceive their beauty, their body image. Like, this really is, it's far reaching, which, now that you say, that last comment that someone made was discussing the differences between admiration and fetishization.
ooh, that's a good
That
one.
is a good one. I think I'm gonna save
Hmm.
it though, y'all, because I want to. I'm first of all, Dawnette, you're coming back for season 2. We're definitely having a part 2. We're definitely having a
Oh
part.
my
No,
gosh,
we're
she got a
having.
call back.
I
Thank you.
girl, without question, like, does not even need to audition. No, listen. When I thought about this topic, I was like, so I need to, like, text on it. Like, I honestly, because I knew we'd be able to go in. And what I really appreciate about it is that we don't have the same experiences. We can't
Mm-hmm.
have the same experiences based on what we look like. And simply, as I said before, two Black people can't. We just don't. Just the way we
Yeah,
navigate the
we're
world.
individuals. Like, no one
Correct.
is the same thing.
But we
So
can
yeah.
still have this conversation openly and
Mm-hmm.
honestly with each other. And I think that's really, really important. And that's something that I think is really important, to acknowledge the spaces where we do have privilege. Everyone has privilege in different ways. And I think
Yes,
that's important to say,
absolutely.
because I do think sometimes a little bit of the resentment comes from people assuming that they don't get to operate in the same privilege as someone else, right? Like they don't get to get the
Mm-hmm.
same things as someone else. But the reality is, I might be privileged
Yeah.
because I'm lighter skinned, but I'm also privileged because I'm able bodied. I'm
Yep.
also privileged because I can speak English comfortably in a setting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also privileged
Yeah.
because I can afford to live in an apartment. I'm like, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
other things that my privileges I have that also someone of a darker skin tone also has. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's also really important to remember that, and to also remember that the privileges someone else might be afforded don't necessarily dictate a better life. It's a different sort of
Yes.
struggle that
Mm-hmm.
they have to exist within.
Yeah.
And reality, if we're focusing on the comparison, we're losing sight of the overarching thing, which is colorism and racism exist because of white supremacy.
That's the root of it.
That's
That
the
is the
root of
root.
it. So we can have these conversations are important. Like we need to talk about this stuff. We need to kind of find
Mm-hmm.
healing within our own communities. But in reality, we need to keep our eye like on the sparrow. Like keep your eye on the
You know,
prize. Like
your eyes on target.
we can talk about this
Yes.
all day long, but I hope that we remember that we got here because somebody decided that one of us should be in a house and one of us should be in a field, and then they would dictate what that meant about us as people.
Yeah.
That's
And
literally how we
we
got
turned
here.
around and internalized
We
that.
internalized it,
Um,
and
yeah.
we conditioned ourselves by it, and we conditioned our survival by it, which is really, disheartening in some
Mm.
ways, which is why I never like to end on a negative note. So here are my last two questions
Yeah.
for you. And
Hmm.
I think your perspective is really important because of your experiences. So the first one is, do you think that light skin, and let's make it specific to black people, do you think
Hmm.
light skinned black people have a responsibility to combat colorism and to speak out against colorism, and how much so?
Um, from my personal opinion, because the thing about it is, whenever I hear someone say, like, we talk about that phrase we haven't talked about, like reverse colorism or something along those
Mm,
lines, it reminds me a lot of what we say about reverse racism. It doesn't exist because if a system is in place to benefit you, you cannot be then oppressed by that same system. It's
correct.
there to benefit you. So the same thing for colorism. It benefits the lighter your skin. So at the core of it, it's there for your benefit.
Right.
So I would say the same thing in a way that I would say to a white person. It's really just to make sure, be aware of it, because
Mm.
I think we're still sadly in that place where some people are still in that phase where just like it doesn't exist. I'm just like we've been here too long, boo boom, get
Girl,
catch up.
people.
To your point, to me, it's just kind of like I go back to Amanla and thinking what they did, and being aware of it and knowing that, like, okay, if I'm in a system where I benefit or I'm taking up space, should this be a moment where I should take a step back and make sure that I'm not blocking out someone else's like opportunities, or making sure that, cause it feels the same way where it's just kind of like, yes, because you know who it actually reminds me of, and I don't want to get it twisted because I actually do respect her and I really like her, but this is the one area that we just don't agree on, and I feel like that's natural. I feel like people think that you have to always agree on 100%.
No.
It's not. But I think of Amanda Seals.
Oh, I love Amanda Seals. Amanda
I
Seals
love
is not
Amanda
everybody's
Seals.
most
Yes.
popular person, but she always keeps it a
I
hundred percent real.
She always keeps it 100. I think I love her and her little cancer self. She just has so much emotion. She
Thank
has so much
you.
passion.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I really think that people like to give her the trope of angry black woman because she does get passionate and she does say what some people don't want to hear but needs to
Sure.
be said. And there's the one area where I would kind of like, say that I don't fully agree with her is that she's within that camp that kind of says that, like, colorism never benefits me, or at least that's how I interpreted what she said.
Right,
I don't want to
right,
put words in her mouth. Um, but it's kind of like, well, that's step one, is understanding that it benefits you regardless if you're able to know it or
right.
not,
Whether
because
you're
that's what the
aware of
system
it.
is, whether you're aware of it at
Actually,
all.
and that ties
And
completely
that's
back to even white people having an understanding of it. They don't need to. The system writes
right.
itself at this point.
Exactly. And so yeah, it's hard to say because what can they do? It's more so just education. It's more so just like how you were saying, like, being willing to, like, if they hear something, someone saying something derogatory, because there's a lot of people who build their self-worth on, the foundation that they're better than other people.
Mm-hmm.
So also reevaluate yourself. Like, do you feel like you're better than dark-skinned people? Do you have implicit biases, whether you know them or not? Like, really unpacking that and doing that internal work.
That's
And then
real.
yeah, just being, yeah, and I think just being aware of the system, because because whenever I think of the other thing too, when I think of like allyship as well, and it's not really allyship because they black, like, it's, that's the other thing, I don't want to invalidate or remove that from them, but it's also like making sure the other person has a platform. Like, who I really think of? I do think of Tisha Campbell and then Tashina Arnold. So Tisha Campbell and Tashina Arnold, they are real life friends. They are like really good friends. And I remember Tisha Campbell, I think, got was offered a role, or they would like sometimes like be offered a role, and they'll look out for each other,
Mm,
because we all know that Tisha Campbell, because she is lighter, she's going to be more favored, but she
right.
knows, if not only if a role is better suited for her friend, she's also going to put her friend on and be like, hey,
I love
actually,
that.
why don't you look at this person, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why I love seeing actresses like Viola Davis and, oh my gosh,
Lupita
Taraji P.
Nyong'o, Taraji
Lupita
P.
Nyong'o,
Henson.
Tahandra P. Henson, like, they are people who unapologetically, like, just root for people within their field. And
Yeah.
especially because we're told that they're like, they're your competitors, like, you're not supposed to be there, and
Right.
they lift each other up so openly,
Shout
and
out to
just like,
Black women once
cheer.
again. You know,
Oh,
not that I'm saying we don't have things to fix, y'all, but we're really out here
right,
doing the healing on the toxicity, because you might think
we're
that Black
trying.
women in that industry would have to be more cutthroat in order to like make a space for themselves, but they're out here making
Hmm.
lanes for everybody, and that's what it's about, like making lanes. And it's
That's what it's
also
about.
accountability, because when you were talking about like also people being aware of their own biases, it made me think of Zoe Saldana when she decided to play Nina Simone.
Oh my
And when
god,
Zoe
that
Saldana
true
decided,
child.
that happened, y'all. And sis
It
was out
sure did.
here.
She made that
She
choice.
was
She
out
made
here in
she
blackface. Okay, that's what it
she
was.
sat in that
In a
chair as they done
prosthetic
for
nose with
hours.
prosthetic
Prosthetic
teeth.
nose,
Okay, like she didn't look.
prosthetic hair
They
with the hair. She got the hair,
correct.
the afro
Could
hair.
have literally. And this woman, by the way, I believe Zoe Saldana identifies as Puerto Rican and Dominican, which would make her Afro Latina. But at the time,
Mm.
she received a lot of criticism for the role. First of all, it flopped.
Yeah, she should have.
And
As it should, because like, at first of all, listen, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Wait.
wait though, because the Nina Simone Foundation even railed against that movie, and this woman still had the gall on public radios and in interviews
It
to say that colorism wasn't a thing. She doesn't see color. She should be able to. If you, she said something along the lines of, she said, if Elizabeth Taylor could play Cleopatra, I can play
oh
Nina
child,
Simone.
oh my
Girl, that
Jesus,
was a
oh my
problem
God.
as
I
well.
just,
Elizabeth Taylor should not have been playing Cleopatra, sis.
it
That was called
is.
whitewashing. But the interesting thing is, it's now 2020, and Zoe Saldana has apologized for that.
you
She
know,
had a
we can say
conversation with,
growth.
I
Yeah.
think it was Steven, I think his last name is Canal. He worked on Pose. I
Okay.
think he's one of the writers or creators, but they had a conversation, and you could tell she was incredibly remorseful. She's like, I should have never. And they were talking about how within
Mm-hmm.
the Latin, and this actually sprouted off of everything
Yeah.
happening within the Heights and so forth. You know,
Yeah.
Afro Latinas and Afro Latinos are often dismissed in media and in conversation and
Yeah.
in culture, and it was an issue in the Heights movie where they didn't see representation and they were called out for it. This is a separate
Mm-hmm.
conversation from Zoe Saldana, but it reminded me of that because in the conversation she was having, she was talking about how growing up the idea of being lighter was perpetuated as a good thing. You don't want, in
Yes.
Creole we have a term called tête grain, which means like basically like nappy hair, and you don't want hair like that.
Mm-hmm.
You want straight hair. You
Right.
want
It's
lighter
negative.
skin.
It's a
It's a
negative
negative thing.
connotation.
So she was
Right.
talking about how that conditioning really prevented her and tapped in with her ignorance from truly understanding the issue 10 years ago with that decision. But she was incredibly remorseful.
Absolutely.
And she was
And
like,
I
you
think
know,
also
someone
because,
else, she's like, someone else needs to tell that story, not me. It was not my place. Like, she was very
yes,
remorseful. And I do think we have to
and she
make,
understood.
and I think that we have to make space, like the same way we hold people accountable, we have to also make space for growth and to forgive people and allow them to do better,
Hmm.
which I think she has done. I think we're at a point now where people can
Yeah,
like kind of like chill out on Zoe Saldana.
absolutely agree too, where we always have to allow space. Because I also think it's very interesting that I noticed that, with the idea of like cancel culture and all these other things, we're moving towards a society where we're not allowing people to make a mistake. And I don't think people realize that's actually they're setting themselves up, because human nature is to err. It is to make mistakes. You trip, you fall, and you get back up. And that's how you learn. That's how
Mm.
you grow. But if we're creating this space where no one can ever mess up, even though we know people are messing up, that's how you're getting like your daily witch hunts on Twitters, and you have people are just like constantly going after people. And I also think about like Zoe Sandel. Like, I grew up in the Bronx, and I believe you said she's Puerto Rican and Dominican, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are literally the two cultures
Yep.
that, outside of like Black, African American, and Caribbean, like in the Bronx throughout New York, those are the cultures you intersect with the most. Like, I remember I always say that I spend the most of my time in South Bronx because that's where my grandmother lived,
Mm-hmm.
and that block literally was like half Black, half Puerto Rican.
Mm.
So, I grew up on Mark Anthony, still love him. Like,
Oh,
he got pops. Brooke, I love all of his dog. Yeah, he's just a great singer, a great musician. But I knew early on, I was just like, oh, they out here with their umbrellas. Some of them are really out here making sure they don't. So I learned very early on, I was like, oh, they don't want to get dark.
they don't want to
Like,
get dark,
dark
bro.
skin is not okay.
And
And
there's
then
a
you
lot
start
of
learning.
places like that. A
And
lot of
I will say
places in
that,
the islands that are like that, which
oh
is
yeah,
ironic because y'all
absolutely.
can't help out but be out under the sun. So, so
Yeah.
my very last question for y'all. This was supposed. Listen, this is gonna be edited down. It's 2 hours. This always happens with me and Dawnette, so I'm not even fucking surprised.
When you said 1 hour, I was like, okay,
Yeah,
girl,
I
we'll see.
know.
I didn't want to jinx
It
it, but I was
was
just like, all
it was
right.
well wishes. It was aspirational. But my very last question, and this is a broad question: how do you think education can play a role in eliminating colorism
Mm, education. I mean,
or counteract it at the very least? Maybe not eliminate it, but kind
yeah,
of balance out those sorts of experiences that people have. And I
yeah.
know it's tricky because I feel like colorism is also very unconscious sort of thing.
Mm,
I remember in college having a friend say to me, like, you wouldn't understand, like, you're light skinned. And
mm,
it was a wake up call for me. Like, it was, of course, like,
mm.
I was defensive at first. Like, how could you say that? Like, I'm black just like you. Like, I didn't actually say that, but in my head, I was like, wow, like, that's really fucked up.
Right.
But
That was the
really,
first time you experienced
I
it, or you were
experienced
told
that,
that
that
this
distinction.
is your identity.
Correct.
Hmm.
And so like it was kind of shell shocking, but in the same token, like when I tell you it opened up my eyes to the beauty of blackness and really that
Mm,
there is honestly, and I say this for people of color, in general, but because I'm black, that's why I'm saying this. There is nothing like us out there. Just like everything we
yeah,
touch
yeah.
turns gold. And it's because like it sources from like ancestry. Like it's just like there is
Hmm.
like flavor woven into our DNA, y'all. And like it was
Absolutely.
just such a beautiful thing to kind of have my eyes open. It was a really stark way to have my eyes open, but it made me realize that it's really important to understand that we're a kaleidoscope of a community in terms
Hmm.
of how I also move in a space, right? But in the same token, I really wish I grew up with that understanding. I really wish it was like
Mm,
infused
hmm.
into conversations in my family or in school
Yeah.
or with other black kids. And so I guess like I always wonder like how do we start doing that? How do we start integrating those sorts of conversations at a younger age? It shouldn't be that at almost 30 that's when I'm now reaching this full comfortability to be able to discuss
Mm,
this topic,
yeah.
because look at how much
Yeah.
trauma we've all encountered along the way.
Absolutely. And I think what comes to mind too, and just thinking about, like, you saying that you wish you knew that when you were younger. I think, and you see this with other cultures, and it's funny because when you were saying like, you know, being black is lit, because it is, it also reminds me of why like black comedy, or just how people think like, oh, black people are funny, or when you think of other cultures, like I think some of the best comedians throughout history have usually been like black, or they've been Jewish.
Mm.
And I think there's that kind of, from that, when you're being oppressed in a way, be it like racism, or you face anti-Semitism and everything that's and that encompasses, if you are still able to laugh or find humor, there is some, because I always say that my humor is very dark.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very
Same.
it's very, my humor is very dark, and it's because, like, you know, I lived a life where I had very low moments,
Mm.
and the only thing that kept me going was that glimmer of humor, of being able to find something to laugh about.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that's all I had. So if you think like being oppressed in so many different ways and still being able to smile, still being able to have fun, I feel like that's why Black joy is such, it within itself, it feels like a rebellion, because
Yeah.
yeah, you do all this stuff to me and yet I'm still having a
I'm
blast,
having a
you
good
know,
ass time and I'm still shaking my ass.
still
Okay,
still shaking my
hands on my knees,
ass,
and I'm doing my thought shit. Thanks, Meg.
still doing the electric slide to whatever song you put on. I'm
Oh,
gonna find my one. I'm gonna find the counts,
listen.
and I'm gonna still hit
I
it.
learned how to do the electric slide in 5th grade. Shout out to my teacher, Mrs. Neal. Okay, she was a beautiful black woman who taught me the electric slide, and she taught me the cool way to do it is to not clap your hands, and that's why I don't. Period.
No, she gave you the ends.
She gave me the
Wow,
ins and outs. She really changed the game for
love
me.
it.
Okay.
You know, that's where you get, and then you get a little, you know, a
You
little
get a little
salty on the
saucy
dip.
in it. You do a little
You
shake.
just like, you know,
You do a
the
little
little
spin. Come on now, you get comfortable with it, and then you start breaking up beats, bro.
what? Once you listen, electric
Listen,
slide, I love
I'm
that. It
with
can just,
you.
it doesn't matter whatever song,
Boogie down.
it's gonna happen. But yeah, I think it's, when you were talking, you reminded me of this book. One of the first books I read that kind of led me down this path, and it's one of my favorite books. It's Lies My Teacher Told Me,
Mm,
where it talks about, it goes through like narrative by narrative of these different stories we were told as historical fact, when really the truth is completely different. Like, you know, when we learn about Helen Keller, we learn about her story and the fact that, you know, with the well and her, like, you know, being able to say water, and then we end her narrative there, but no one
right.
talks about how she became the socialist. No one talks about how, I think she's one of the founders of the ACLU, or
She
she's
is.
connected to
Sis
that,
was really active.
like really out here, and like all these different narratives, or the fact that, you know, America's progress when it comes to racial reckoning has always been kind of like, you know, going upward at a, like, you know, a consistent upward capacity, when really it goes up and it goes down,
Right.
because we were actually being more progressive, and then Woodrow Wilson came in, who was kind of like, you know, low-key KKK member, and then he kind of regressed us even more. So when I think of education, I'm thinking of, or how we can do it, I'm just like, those school books unfortunately are what they want you to learn. The fact that
Mm,
they want us to feel like our history is solely rooted in slavery, and that's all we had to offer, and that's
right.
all we can know until it's February, then you learn about peanut butter and Martin Luther King, and then that's it. But
I wish y'all could see my face right now because I'm gooped. But anyway, please continue.
but that's what it is. We learned about, you know, George Washington Carver and
I'm
Martin Luther King,
dead.
and not, and it's not to diminish what they have accomplished,
But there's so much
but
more.
there's so much more, and we all know that it's part of, that's how you suppress people, and making sure if they don't know there's a possibility. And I think that goes back to our
Right.
conversation about the older generation.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know you can dismantle the system, you're always going to think you have to work within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, especially with our generations and Gen Z, because we have access to the internet, for better or for worse sometimes, it could be like we also have access to information, so we are no longer confined to what you just teach us. We can actually go out there and find other information and learn things, like the fact that, because I also firmly believe, because we mentioned that Haiti was heavily taxed by
Mm-hmm.
the France by French, and they didn't stop paying that tax, I believe, until they
Yep.
had that massive earthquake.
There
They
it's
were
yep.
literally paying it for that
Yep.
long. But
There's still so much debt that Haiti should not be paying, y'all. But anyway.
and the reason why they had debt, and this is the part that I'm just like, y'all wild, y'all really wild. The reason why they have so much debt is because it's a loss of property, meaning
Mhm.
they rebelled successfully.
Mhm.
No longer were the French slaves, and French was just like, okay, that's cool, but you are our property, and now we lost our property,
So
so you
you
got
have
to
to pay
pay
for
us.
it. You got to
So
you
it's
we're
literally,
renting your bodies.
we're renting your bodies, exactly. And it just goes to show, like, that's the same thing when it comes to education, that heavy tax, where it's just like
Right.
you have to make an example of people so they don't get the same idea,
Mm.
that they can free themselves. And I think that's what it is about education. It's not just about learning, but it's like learning what they're trying to make sure you don't get access to. Like,
Mm.
what are they trying to keep from you? Like, what is this information?
These are all literally strategies of white supremacy, y'all, to keep us from
Absolutely.
recognizing our power as a collective. And I really think that's a very, very important point, because that is white supremacists are most afraid of, for sure, is that there's power
Mhm.
in numbers and that people are starting to recognize
They
that.
know it. I mean, there's a good reason why Republicans are so focused on this idea that, like, staying the majority in their country, because they know that, especially with the rise of interracial relationships, people immigrating to this country, that their majority in this country is slowly lowering year by year, and they are scared because of exactly what happened in Georgia last year. They know that people of color tend to vote more Democratic. Now, I'm not over
Mhm.
here saying I love the Democrats, because I got issues with them too.
Ooh, Uncle
Um,
Joe.
okay, I won't say he's doing his best, but he's doing something.
Is he doing his
Um,
best? Because the whole Israel Palestine thing was really not it.
I mean,
Shout
like,
out to the US for being the only ones to not say anything productive.
but we're imperialists. We're like the world's bullies, and at the end of the day, we always have a bottom line, because
I
it
told
is,
y'all,
because it's really
Dawnette
about business.
always tells the truth. I told y'all, listen, give them your closing line, because we gotta wrap this up. Because you're out here making it too saucy for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, it
It's the
is what
tea.
it is.
It's the tea. Really. Okay, well, I mean, I don't want to even like close out this conversation because it's really been so great, but I really am going to have you on again, and I think I'm going to ask, we're going to dive in even more, because the reality is, like, we honestly just scratched the surface, y'all, because we
We
spoke
did.
about colorism really, I think, from our own identities, but colorism, it does not just
Mm,
impact the Black community. It in fact impacts the South Asian community.
yes.
It impacts a
Yes.
wide range of racial ethnicities and backgrounds. So it really is a
Yeah.
larger conversation. And, we dipped our toes in and out of things. But, do you have any last thoughts, Dawnette?
No, I just really appreciate you having me
Oh,
and us having this conversation, because it's so interesting. I think that it's like you were saying, it's just having these conversations, being open to other people's narratives, and being willing to understand where they're coming from. That, but also, because I also see other people who are kind of like, actually, no, I'm tired of listening to other people.
right.
I'm like, I'm really tired of all the bullshit this society has put on me. I'm tired of feeling like I always have to like shoulder everything if we're talking about, specifically about Black femmes. And I also don't want to come from a point where I invalidate that, because I
Mm,
completely understand it's tiring.
mm-hmm.
And that some people have I may not agree with everything someone may say, but I completely understand where they're coming from, and I won't invalidate what they're saying, or any pain or any feeling they may have about it. So yeah, this is just colorism from the perspective of like one dark skinned girl,
Absolutely. And
some one
color is
regular degular girl
correct.
from the Bronx.
Okay, and one perspective from a girl who's sometimes light skinned and sometimes brown, and who's from Miami and
I
also
didn't
Broward
listen.
County. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I love that, and I really very much appreciate you coming on to have this conversation. The
Yeah,
people are gonna find out though about Dawnette Samuels. I'm just letting y'all know that now.
I mean,
Um,
like, they could find my Instagram is privated, so they can try. They can go right ahead.
okay,
I will approve, requests as they
okay,
come.
and that's how it's done. Okay, come talk to her agent, aka me. Thank you so much, Dawnette. I'm gonna close this out in 3, 2, 1.
Just a dash.
All right, sweet peas, let's get into it. Come on, kitty girls. Let's get into the rec room. Before we even jump in, I just want to say thank you again so much to Dawnette, y'all. Really, truly was such a fantastic conversation. The thing about Dawnette, y'all, is she didn't even come prepared, with all those history things that she was saying. Like, that is off the dome. Sis is just a brilliant person to be around, to have conversation with, to learn from. Her art is truly also phenomenal. As you heard, her Instagram is currently private, which I'm down for. Come on, Beyonce, for Virgo, keeping it to yourself. But she truly is an amazing artist, and I would definitely, if you ever have the opportunity to come across Dawnette and her artwork, I think, many people would resonate with it. She's a really dope person, and I will definitely be having her back on to talk more, with probably other guests as well, because I think it's important to have other perspectives. It was really important for me to have this conversation with someone who was in the same community as me, but didn't necessarily have the same experiences as me, because I think that's what makes for a worthwhile conversation, is being able to hear from someone whose life is different from you, but who you can find common ground with. So anyhow, moving on, let's get into the rec room, y'all. So I have two that I'm going to talk more about. The last is really just an artist and some music that I think y'all should really check out. But the first recommendation I have for y'all, and I really have to shout out JP because he's the one who put me onto this show. So thank you, JP. We mentioned this actually in the last episode, but the show I'm about to talk about is Legendary. Okay, y'all? Legendary. And the theme song is stuck in my head. It is so catchy. It goes, so you want to make a statement? You want to be a star? It's just like the way it drags. It's catchy. It's great. And so is the show. So it's an American voguing reality competition show, and it's streaming on HBO Max. And it's really all about the world of ball culture. The series follows LGBT house members, and not all of them are LGBTQ, actually, I should say, but they're predominantly from 8 different houses, and they navigate through 9 different balls. So basically dancing, voguing, walking events, there's other challenges, with the goal of not only winning the Superior House trophy, but winning $100,000 cash prize for the winning house. And the series was, it's been praised, obviously, because it's the first of its kind to be on a major network, but it's just also such a stunning show to experience. It really is educational. So here's the cool thing about it. Each episode features a fashion or performance challenge, and they have different responsibilities that they have to uphold, right? So like, you have to make sure you have arms in this performance, you have floor work in this performance, you have voguing, you have runway. It's all these different sorts of elements of Vogue. There are 5 elements, which you'll learn about them on the show, so I'm not going to say more. And also, the judges are incredible. So Deshaun Wesley is the master of ceremonies and legendary father of the House of Basquiat. I have such a crush on Deshaun Wesley. I'm not even going to lie. He's beautiful to look at, but he's just got a great commanding voice. He's a great MC. He does commentating. So that's basically like when someone's walking, like you're just like encouraging them, and kind of pushing them to keep performing. And he just does a really, really fantastic job of that. And he also keeps the judges and contestants in line. Okay, sis? And you've got some strong ass judges. Here are your judges. You have Jamila Jamil. She's from The Good Place, y'all. She's a comedian. I personally don't find Jamila Jamil that funny. I'm not sure why she's the head of the judges per se, but I do think she's kind of like the Paula Abdul, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you need someone who's a little more gentle and, compassionate, I think. You have La Roche, who is, I think he calls himself a celebrity image architect, but he's definitely like known for being a stylist for both Zendaya and my girl, my queen, Celine Dion. So he knows how to style, because Celine Dion and Zendaya are fashionable. And he's really there to kind of really talk about the fashion aspect of things, which is also a huge part of ballroom culture. It's how you present yourself. It's how you carry yourself, your confidence. Come on, darling. And then you have Leomi Maldonado, who's referred to as the Wonder Woman of Vogue. Sis is out here doing flips, dips, kicks. She's the one who's actually the most informed about the ballroom culture. And it's really great because they speak to the experts on the show in a way where they are given a platform to talk about the things that they know best. And so it's really cool because they'll also have guests on the show. But before I jump ahead, there's also Megan Thee Stallion, which how could I forget? We all love Megan Thee Stallion. Come on, aka Tina Snow. And she also is just, it's really cool to actually see her as a judge on the show, because I think I would always see voguing elements in her music videos, and I didn't realize that the timeline of it was her actually participating as a judge on the show. So it's like she was actually taking the art forms that she was learning about and incorporating it into her own mainstream culture. Talk about an ally, bro. That's how you do it. So I'm just very much a fan of just the judges as well. They always have guest judges, and they're very much guests in the house. Some of them come from ballroom culture, some of them don't. And it's very entertaining. I mean, how can it not be? Look at everything I just said, you know? There's fashion coaches, Johnny Wujek? I think it's Johnny Wujek. He worked with Katy Perry, and Tanisha Scott, who is the performance coach. So it's really great. I just want to give a couple of shout outs. The House of Lanvin, Carlos Lanvin, he does their arms. This was in the first season. I mean, there is a performance where he's basically dressed up as Doctor Strange doing hands movement. And my goodness, the fluidity, it's gorgeous. Shout out to House of Balmain. Father Jamari Balmain, y'all, just slays. And then in this current season, my current favorite house is the House of Tishi. They just take ballroom to the next level. They really take it to the future. And also House of Miyake Mugler, because Father Arturo, I also have a really big crush on him. Oh my gosh. I think like people who just have wonderful smiles and energy and just exude such just like genuine like care for other people and their craft. He's just so wholesome. And so is Deshaun Wesley, and it really is such a beautiful show. It's educational, it's inspiring, it's incredibly entertaining. I don't usually like competition shows, y'all, but this one just really takes it to the next level. I've actually never been to a ball in New York, and it's something I want to go to. One of my friends actually did invite me because I believe they're going to be performing in one at some point this summer. So it's definitely a space I want to explore more, especially as someone who loves performance. I love dance. I love the arts. I love theater. And I have a feeling a lot of things that I adore and appreciate within the world of the arts and culture were inspired by ballroom. You know, they've been around here for so long underground, and it is beautiful to just see this art form, this art, this culture, these communities, these houses, these people finally get the platform that they deserve. So shout out to Legendary, okay? They want to make a statement. They want to be a star because we're legendary, baby. Yes. And listen, anybody who watches the show, I'm doing the little Laomi Maldonado clap right now for you. So the next show that I want to recommend, and I'm honestly very surprised that I didn't speak about it before, but the final season is coming out, and that is Money Heist, also known as La Casa de Papel, the House of Paper in Spanish. It's a Spanish heist crime drama television series. It was created by Alex Pina, and it basically traces these two long prepared heists led by the professor, that's the character. One is on the Royal Mint of Spain, and the other one is on the Bank of Spain. So the narrative is told in a real time like fashion, and you have flashbacks, you have time jumps, hidden character motivations, and you have an unreliable narrator. So it's just like, it's super complex. It's really cool. In the first season, it's set in Madrid, and basically a mysterious man known as the professor. He recruits a group of 8 people, and they choose cities for code names. So like Tokyo, Denver, I'm trying to think of Moscow, like very cool names, honestly. And they're basically, they have an ambitious plan. They're trying to steal 2.4 billion from the Royal Mint of Spain. They take 67 people hostage. They plan to remain inside for 11 days to print the money. And of course, you know, all these sorts of different things ensue because humans are humans and things get complicated. But this show blew up, y'all. You know, they call it seasons, but it's part 1, part 2, and now there's a part 3. What I really love about this show, first of all, make sure if you're going to watch this show that you're watching its original language in Spanish with English subtitles, because dubbed English over anything is trash. Just FYI, it's always better to watch something in its original language with subtitles because you get the true emotion that was expressed by those people because they're speaking in their native tongue. So it really is an incredible show, but that's one recommendation I would say about that. Why I really love it is the story arcs and the way they intertwine. This show is not about thieves stealing money. This show is about people reclaiming the autonomy that's often stolen from them by greater powers, greater systemic powers. And so you really get to unravel these characters and understand their motivations, not only for choosing, because that's a risk to go literally rob a bank of $14 billion. Like, clearly there's something that you're either desperate that, to fix, to reclaim, to prove, to navigate through, to heal from, like all these different character motivations. I definitely want to give a shout out to Ursula Corbero. She plays Tokyo. And I'm not going to say their real names because that's kind of the appeal. Like, they kind of have this sort of spy. But she is the unreliable narrator. And she's definitely, I would say, the most hot-headed of the crew. If they end up in a conflict, most likely she's either at the center of it or she did something to create that sort of domino effect. This woman is just like, it's not just what she physically looks like, it's how she carries it. And I think that's really important because someone can be a feast for your eyes, sure, but the reason I think someone is like appealing and sensual and really draws an attraction is because they ooze a certain confidence and charisma and sex appeal. And Sis really does that. And she carries the show, man. She carries the show with her narration. I think it's a really, I think, important role to have, and I think she does it well. The other shout out I want to give to is to the El Profesor, who's played by Alvaro Morte. He's the mastermind of the heist. He assembled the group. He's also another character's younger brother. I won't say who, because that's definitely a plot line as well, but it's just really beautiful watching his mind unfold. I don't think it's often that we see quiet or introverted characters get the platform to show their brilliance, but also show like where they struggle socially. Like, I think most of the time people just assume that the genius is the recluse. And I don't think he gets pigeonholed into that character. I think he gets kind of pushed out of his comfort zone as a character because of the people he chooses to become a part of the heist. I think the expectation is that he'll always be behind the computer, And this show, man, just expect the unexpected because it's never what you thought you would see coming. And the last person I want to highlight is Raquel Murillo. And I'm going to name her because you learn about her by her name, not by her code name. And she's played by Itziar Ituño. And Raquel is an inspector. She's an inspector of the National Police Corps, and she's put in charge of the case. The thing that's so cool, though, is that her job specifically is to work with hostage situations. So her job is basically to talk to the person who's done the hostage, or is doing the hostage, I guess I should say. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. But her job is to basically negotiate with them. She's a negotiator. She's a master negotiator. It's very interesting seeing how her relationship with El Profesor develops over the series in general, because they're essentially playing each other. He's the heist master and she's trying to uncover what the heist master wants in order to kind of have the cleanest resolution. So it's really just a brilliant show. It's brilliantly written. It's very exciting. It's aesthetically really beautiful to look at. I think if I were to kind of do a mashup of what it is, I would say it's definitely a little V for Vendetta. I would say that. I would mix it in with a little Orange is the New Black, just in terms of like humor. And then I think the last, it's kind of difficult, but I would say soap opera drama, honestly. Definitely like a Spanish soap opera drama. Like it's a mix of all those sorts of things. And it's really executed really, really well. They also actually have I believe they have a documentary that they made either after part 1 or part 2 where they talk about how they made it, because y'all, they're in some big ass venues. They're in some big ass bank. They're doing a lot of crazy stunts. It's a heist. It's a heist with 8 different special skilled people getting $14 billion and having over 50 people held hostage. Like, chaos is going to ensue. And it's just really entertaining. And you really start rooting for the people who are stealing that money, baby, because they are talking to the people. And that's why I'm saying Viva Vendetta. These aren't thieves just taking money to take money. This is to give back to the people. This is to prove a point to issues systemic issues within Spain. So it's really powerful. Great show. Check it out. And the very last recommendation I have is Fouché. Fouché is basically an artist. She's 28. She's from Harlem, New York. And she was actually featured on The Voice. I learned about Fouché through my roommate, Simone. So shout out to Simone for putting me on. We spent a weekend just kind of watching her music videos and listening to her. And her voice is just, it's haunting. It's enchanting. It's soothing. And it's unique. I've really never heard anyone like her, and I just really love the production of her music. So what I actually wanted to recommend, though, was her music video called My Slime. It's just so cute. It's a very kitschy, unexpected sort of song about love and losing love, but the music video itself just really sets the song at another level for me because it's just so cinematic. There's a plot twist that you don't expect. It's just a really, really beautiful music video. So that's my last recommendation, y'all. I would definitely also check out her other music. Another song she has that's really great is called Single AF, Single as Fuck, Deep End, and Gold Fronts, which features Lil Wayne. So great artist. Check her out. Just really, you might know the song Deep End. It's like, shorty gon' get that paper, da 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 da. It's got like that whole riff, but she's really, really wonderful. She's great. Love her. Going to continue listening to her and adding her to my playlist. So that's everything, y'all. That is everything for this episode of Just a Dash. Thank you so much if you made it through to yet another episode. I do want to let you know that we are coming to a close with season 1 of Just a Dash, which is wild to think about because I remember when I was launching the bonus episode and all the nerves I felt. But yes, there are 2 more episodes left. Next episode is going to be kind of a regular formatted episode, but I'm letting you know now for episode 10, I'm going to be posting on Instagram. I want y'all to ask me whatever questions you kind of want, not just about the podcast process, but about me. You know, I've been told that I can kind of be a closed book, which I don't even think that's true, but I think if someone doesn't ask, I'm not telling, you know? So it's really kind of an opportunity for y'all to get to know me more or, you know, ask questions that you'd like advice on or any recommendations about what you want to hear in the next season. It's kind of a free-for-all. It's a mixed bag. So I'll share more on the internets. But until then, y'all, I'll catch you on the airwaves next time, sweet peas. Please, please always remember that the world is a better place because you're in it. Okay? Take care, y'all.